For the last few months, BDog and I have been creating these episodes for you, this show, Sell Me This Pro. And what we do is we take a look at up and coming talents, and BDog kind of pitches them to us as penny stocks, and we decide where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And we've had an entire season where we did this, and we changed it up so much. So sometimes we focused on an individual player, sometimes we ended up focusing on a whole team. Other times we focused on an entire event and just listed all the players we'd be watching. And one of the things we thought would be fun is at the end of season 1 to kind of recap who we had spoken about, how they were doing, and to see what we got right and what we got wrong. And that's what we're going to do today in the second episode of season 2. I have 4 or 5, we'll see how we go, players that we've spoken about that I've kind of pulled up. BDog does not know who I'm going to throw at him. Just to see how we did. What's good for you is they're all names you know, so I try to keep them as familiar as possible. But we're going to recap exactly what we said about them and then see how it played out. So I hope you're ready.
Okay.
BDog has been like commentating till 3 a.m. every day, so he's walking in like a weird cloud of exhaustion. So I'm really excited, friends, to throw this all at you to start.
Yeah,
What a way for you to wake up.
I don't know what to expect. Yeah, it's recording this on my time. It's 1 p.m. and I've just woken up, which is a bad thing to say. But I'm interested to know what's going on. So, and I can't remember what I said about any of these people either, apart from I knew that I liked them, or some I didn't like. So, it'd be interesting to sort of see what you got. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. So the first player, one of the first, I think it's actually the first episode we did, was the cute baby-faced Brazilian who one day is going to get a neck tattoo and ruin it for all of us, Snow from Pain Gaming. He was actually our first episode, and you said this is one to watch. You were actually very positive about him. You also found clips of him streaming when he was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of good stuff to say. And you know what I love is I've actually got to watch this player throughout the course of 2024 just deliver. And every time I've been on a desk, whether it's at the RMRs or the Major or at IEM Cologne, I've been like, yeah, BDog called that. I think I've actually tried to drop that in on desk so many times, which might be why I'm not getting hired anymore, because I kept punting my YouTube, my YouTube show with BDog, being like, on Sell Me This Pro, we did this. But you nailed this one, right? Right off the gate, you got it right. Snow is on the up and up, and definitely a player that everyone is keeping their eyes on. If I had invested, I wouldn't be making a lot of money, but I definitely see an increase in return.
I think where he was actually when we made that episode to now, I think you'd be making a decent return, to be honest. I think he's actually playing even better than he did at the start of 2025 now. I think he's playing better than he did last year. And Davideus, I think, has definitely helped with that. The one thing with Pain is that they keep changing their roles every map. Like, if you look at the positionings, that you watch the demos, it was actually something that we said when Snow first came into this team, where Snow and Cowairs are changing their positions. Now it's Snow and Davideus are changing up some of their spots on maps, depending on opponent, and also depending on, I think they're still trying to figure things out about who fits in best, which is a bit scary because he's been on that team a while now. But yeah, I don't know. I like the fact he's got a bit of personality to him as well. Like, he's not afraid to kind of give it on LAN in terms of like getting the vibes up and being really loud. And some people like that. Some people hate it. I personally love it. I think it's really good to show character and your personality as well, especially when he's playing as well as he did. So it's a shame for them that they couldn't progress further in Kato, but I am a big fan of this team. Blast Bounty was also a good event for them, so yeah, I'm pretty big on Pain. I really like Pain, and I always have, and I think I always will.
I think one of the things that we did speak about though in that episode was like potential role clashes when you took a look at this team and how it may affect Snow. And like you've kind of brought it up, they're still figuring that one out themselves, right? They're changing up things. They've obviously brought in new players as well, which changes the dynamic a bit as well.
Yeah, and also Davideus is just naturally another aggressive player. And it's actually interesting watching this year because Cowairs used to be quite a aggressive player. Whenever you watched him on Fury Academy, he was the one creating all the space. Now he doesn't do that, and it feels like Cowairs has taken more of Lux's roles. And even though Lux was quite aggressive, he was playing quite a supportive element for this Pain team. and now Davideus and Snow, they're sort of balancing the responsibility. And I think it's actually quite interesting looking at that dynamic, because I think you want Snow to actually be the first guy, and then you want Davideus coming in behind him, because Davideus, I think, has just got more experience overall. But in terms of firepower, I actually think Davideus is the better player currently. So it makes sense for Snow to go first and Davideus to go second. But they're taking time to figure it out, and I think they'll see good returns on it. And obviously, it'll just take a few tournaments for them to warm up into things, because it's a very slow start to the year, and then it immediately gets incredibly congested. So there'll be lots of chances to see Pain throughout this year as well.
I think my biggest thing with Pain last year, though, is we kept talking about time, because we were like, it's this young lineup. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to feel each other out. It was a conversation that came up a lot it was IEM. We said that. I think we said that at a Challenger when we saw them. And then when the RMRs hit, the conversation changed to like, okay, they've run out of time now, right? Like now you're here, you need to deliver. And I feel like they didn't really quite get there at the end of the year. Obviously, now we've seen a lineup change. How much time do they have now before people start getting, especially when I say people, those Brazilian fans start getting a bit frustrated with this team?
Well, the thing is, I don't think the rifle has changed in this team. If you ever make a change to Pain now, NQZ's next out the door. Like, that's the reality of it. You need a more consistent AWPer if he doesn't show that level, because there's times where NQZ is brilliant and there's times where NQZ goes missing, and it feels like actually quite similar to a lot of the young talent in Europe at the moment, where if you start off well, you're going to have a good map, but if you start off slow and then you sort of whiff a clutch, for example, then NQZ can get in his head a little bit. I think NQZ's thing was also LAN experience. He didn't have that much of it. So Pain are quite radical in making changes. The fact that they got rid of Lux, and I thought Lux was actually a pretty decent player for them, but I think it was role clashes more than anything that upset and paved the way for him to go. I think the next change with Pain is probably an AWPer rather than a rifler shift. And when you think about how much time they've got, I think they will stick this roster out to the major cycle and then evaluate after then. I think it's just natural to kind of go through, split the seasons. Now that the major is at the end of the season, you split each roster change sort of into seasons. And we are seeing that naturally with teams anyway, but I think there won't be any drastic changes for Pain in the first half of the year.
So now we've invested in Snow. You told us to at the beginning of the year. You definitely said that there was a worthwhile investment here. I mean, in terms of his career trajectory, because that is the next question, he hasn't exactly blown up, but there's definitely more eyeballs on him. I feel like there's a lot more focus and a lot more interest in what he's capable of doing, right?
I'd say so. And you got to remember the kid's still a kid. Like, this is... He's performing at the top end of... I know we've got our donks, right? I understand that. But Snow is still 17 years old, and he's playing on the best Brazilian team in Counter-Strike. Like, you can't take anything away from that. So in terms of career trajectory, it is up to him a little bit how it goes in that sense. But because he's got all this experience, he's set himself up for life in a way. So I think he'll be absolutely fine. And I really do like Pain, and I do want to see them sort of go deep in tournaments. Next stage for them is going deep in tournaments rather than winning tournaments. And then once they can get consistent in getting deep, like, playoffs experience in tournaments, then they can have the chance to win. Issue is obviously the competition is just so fierce. But I think there is definitely an opportunity in the market for Pain if they keep playing the way they did at Blast Bounty. But also they got to try and, whilst they're in this period of setting up, they also need to be a little bit unpredictable, because it was quite obvious that teams looked at Blast Bounty and were like, okay, this is what you're going to do. And that's exactly what they did. And as soon as you stop the firepower of Davideus and Snow, it's tough for Pain to win rounds. So it's one of those where they need to sort of keep reinventing themselves whilst going through a process of change, which is really hard to do as a team.
So I'm going to keep my money there, right? I mean, if this wasn't an investment, that is, you need to wait around, because Snow's on the up and up.
Yeah, I would definitely keep stock in Snow.
Can you tell that I don't buy stocks? I just want to point this out after a whole season. I have no investment background, no idea what stocks are involved. I don't even know what penny stocks are. I just presumed they were cheap stocks.
I got it off Wolf of Wall Street, so like...
There we go. We ran this whole thing
Yeah.
about like investments and stocks. You had like an accounting background. Don't play this down.
No,
BDog. You
let's not
understood
bring it up.
exactly
Let's
what
not
you were
bring it
talking
up.
about.
I mean,
It
yeah,
was
a
me
bit,
that had no
but
clue.
a bit. But now I don't know. I've been in Counter Strike a long time now, and I've forgotten literally everything about my real world job, and now I'm just in this world, and I
There we
don't know
go.
what stocks are really.
Let's go to the next player. Oh, this is going to be fun. I'm so excited to bring this one up.
Oh no.
Liquid signed him. No one knew who he was. Did an
Okay.
episode
Yeah.
about it. We have to talk about Ultimates because you told us to be very careful about this one. If there was money to put behind a
Yeah.
player, you had massive question marks, and you said you said like, I don't know if I would actually invest in this one. I'm very unsure. How do you feel now?
Still the same, to be honest. Like I'm actually annoyed at myself that he played well for like 2 tournaments, and then I said on one of these episodes, "Oh, I'm sorry, Ultimate." Like that was just I should have just stuck to my guns really, because he does what you expect him to do in this team in terms of he farms lower tier competition. He plays above their level, and then you go into bigger games and he just shits the bed. I think is the ultimate one. I mean, you probably saw the clip on HLTV with Chad getting so angry at him that he just rage quit the broadcast, which was amazing to watch live, actually. But it's one of
Super
those where it's
entertaining.
just like you feel bad for him to a point, and I don't know. I don't really know. I feel like because he obviously got signed in that period where Twists is now an in-game leader. You've now changed your coach. You've now brought on a completely new roster, and then you've made roster changes beyond that. It actually feels like Liquid have gone down the same habits of old, where you're one step away, you're one player away from a team that is genuinely competing for things. And I still think as Liquid's problem has always been their AWPer. And you can say to me, oh, well, Brandon, they had Simple back in like 2016 or whatever it was. Like, yeah, that was a stand-in. But also, they also had OC. Like, you got like the legacy of mid AWPers for Liquid just continues. And when you watch them play against these bigger teams, like if I just click on this game now where Spirit were down a lot of rounds on Nuke, this is the first time I'm actually seeing Ultimate have a good game, but it comes with a sacrifice. The Twists, JKS, and Nerds all dropping like 10 kills. I don't know. I want him to do well from a point of I don't want to say ever to a player, I think you're bad and I want you to struggle. But at the same time, whenever you play against these teams, he doesn't play well. And I think Liquid need more consistency. At the moment, Liquid need consistency because they're going through so much change. And that's why I was worried about signing Ultimate, because you're taking a risk on a completely unknown AWPer that nobody ever would know. Has he made a successful jump to tier 1? In a way, you could argue yes, because he is here and he's still on the roster. But I'd say no, because Liquid, I think their goals and their visions, they've not achieved what they wanted to. And I think a lot of fault in that comes from the AWPer.
We're going to have this conversation about probably 2 more players. So I actually think this is going to come up again if I can tell the future. And based on the players we're going to be talking about, I think I can. But I think making that jump into tier 1, and this was the thing about Ultimate, is he kind of jumped so many steps to get there, right?
Yeah.
We hadn't seen him grinding in tier 2. He was this complete unknown entity. Everyone was very negative in the beginning. And then he did have 2 events where he looked good. Like he did look good. There was moments where everyone was like, oh, maybe, Twist saw something and we all got it wrong. Obviously, I think his debut, he was beating, they'd beat Navi in Blast. Like
Yeah,
that was kind
twice,
of,
right?
yeah. But I feel like what happened very quickly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of the opposition very speedily figured out what his playstyle was and how to shut him down.
Yeah, so this is why I don't know if you remember in that very first episode we did, I said, look, he reminds me a lot of Wrinkle, because when Wrinkle is playing against other teams, he plays really well, but when he goes up against the best who have just been watching him and know exactly how to counter him, he gets found out. Like that's the ultimate quote unquote issue. It is the fact that you're going up against teams that will have time to strategize, will have time to prepare, will have time to figure out that, hey, you just aggressively peak things and then you over peak. Like that's really easily punishable. And that's me breaking down Ultimate's gameplay in a more digestible way. I'm not just saying that's how he plays all the time, but in a vacuum, he's a very aggressive AWPer that wants to find these picks early. And if you just deny him space, and if you just deny him the opportunity to get free fights, then he's not going to play well. And that's exactly what Wrinkle did when he was playing up against Navi, when we had all that beef on Twitter, like tongue-in-cheek, but also probably a bit serious in there, with Wrinkle saying, I think I'm better than Wonderful, and then getting absolutely owned by Navi. Like, it is the same thing.
Shouldn't it be easier for Ultimate, though? Because I feel like we don't really rely on the AWPer as much now in the meta. So if you've got these like strong aggressive riflers, you can kind of get away with not being as phenomenal as you need to be. And if you look at what Liquid's currently got with the addition of Nerds, it should be easier for Ultimate. And yet, and we've only seen him now 2 events of 2025, but it looks like it's even more difficult for him than it was towards the end of last year.
Well, the thing with that, though, is that you're completely changing your play style. Yes, you had your Kindar, who was this aggressive rifler, but he used to be. He was playing a lot more lurky, supportive roles, and Ultimate was the one that they tried to build the round around. You don't have that now with Nerds. You won't have that with Twists being a little bit more comfortable now he's been in-game leading a little while. Like, you've got these aggressive riflers, and again, it goes back to the episode that we were saying, where it's like, you can't take the identity out of Ultimate, otherwise it's not going to work. And immediately, these first few events, what you're seeing is the identity sort of being removed from Ultimate, because he isn't going for as many aggressive peaks. He's looking to sort of sap his rifling teammates. He's not a supportive AWPer. Like, that's not who he is. And by changing that identity, you're going to make things inherently harder for yourself down the line. And if you want to have a supportive AWPer, go and sign a supportive AWPer. That's why VP have got Icy, because it makes sense, because the balance is there, right? Like, it's one of those. And the reason why I bring up Icy is because that was the very first conversation and argument we had in the episode, where it was talking about Ultimate, it was talking about Icy. Like, I don't know. I actually feel sort of bad for Ultimate, because now he's being made to shift his playstyle a little bit, and it's tough. It is difficult.
You may hear a weird little bark in the background. I apologize, but Koji seems to think this is his show, so just come on and make a noise on. It's interesting, you've now called out 2 of the players I want to talk about later, so good job on that, BDog. You've ruined the surprise for everyone.
My bad.
But with regards to Ultimate, so at the time we were like, ooh, be very careful, maybe wait a while before you put any money on this one. I feel like we're still there. I don't think, and what's funny is we did the show, and I think both of us off broadcast were like, damn, those first few events, we were like, damn, we really got this wrong. This is awkward. Like, it's new. We had just started solving this problem. We were like, wow, we really got this wrong. But it turns out, if you just maintain the long game, you pretty much, everything that everyone was saying about him in the beginning was true. Do you think, though, now, as you look into 2025, is there a space for him to improve? Or do you think that Liquid is in a situation where it's just not a good fit for him and the style that he plays, like you mentioned?
If Liquid don't achieve the goals that they want to achieve in the first half of the year, he's out the door. Is the way I see it, because the only way this roster gets better is with an AWPer, and he can prove it here and there. Cool. That's not consistent. That's not what Liquid want. Like, Liquid want the repeated success of when this roster first came together, where they were beating Navi twice, they were running deep in tournaments, they were looking pretty damn good. Like, that's the Liquid that everyone sort of wants to see on a consistent level. Because you look at this team, and it's like, your rifle core is so good. You've got a really dependable anchor in JKS, and it's like that you are literally one step away. And do I hope he figures it out? Yeah, of course. But is the time running out? Probably. I think you've got the Austin Major, where obviously you're still looking at that as an American major for Liquid, even though they're not quite American anymore. In fact, the only players that represent them are Canadian from that side of the globe. So I don't know. I feel like if they don't do well in the major, then Ultimate is probably gone.
Also, what a terrible mistake for them not to do the PGL event. That was I mean, this is completely off topic. I think Twist actually did an interview where he said we won, like we're really upset we're not, but it was an organizational decision. And I was like, damn, that's going to be unfortunate for you. We're now going off topic. It's really interesting because Navi also mentioned that one of the players said that like their entire calendar was decided at the beginning of the year and then let slip that there's like contracts involved. So I'm curious to see how that develops. That to me made like my spidey sense tingled because I was like, where we're going, what is happening? That's why are we not doing PGL? But that is not the topic of this show, and we have absolutely no insights. I am just sowing chaos and drama, so we'll move right along. Ultimate, we're still not investing money. That's where we're sitting, right?
No, I wouldn't be. But that's just me being stubborn. And for everyone watching who is an Ultimate fan, before you type in the comments, like I'm not trying to hate on the guy, but at the same time, I still got the same opinion that I did back then.
And also, like the whole point of this is to go back and say, okay, cool, this is what we said. How did it play out? I think in both cases so far, Snow and Ultimates, I think we were a lot more harsh on Ultimate than what we are now. But it basically what we said was kind of true, which was, oof, he might struggle at this level, and that's kind of what we're seeing.
And he has against the better teams, yeah.
Definitely. Now let's move on to the other player that we used in that Ultimate episode as a like sort of comparison, which at the time was very exciting, coming from Amcal, moving into Cloud9, super hype for IC. This was going to be the big game changer. I was really excited about that Cloud9 roster. We all thought it was very good. I don't think it's fair to the player because I still think he's a good player, but it wasn't a good time for IC. That did not go well.
I don't think it was a good time for any of them, really. And the fact that the thing is that the moves that they've all made, I really like all of them. Apart from Inters on the bench, I mean, maybe that one was overdue about a year. But for Boomich and Axile, them playing together on Bet Boom's actually really cool because people that were watching Cloud9 but weren't really paying attention to Cloud9 would have seen that Axile was actually playing really well in the last like 4-5 months of Cloud9 right before they dissolved. And it was because Boomich was giving him a lot more space and a lot more freedom. And I think Chad actually clowned like some talent on HLTV where he was just like, it's not a new in-game leader. Boomich has been in-game leading him like the entire time on Cloud9. But Axile's numbers were really good. I think there were games actually in that where IC did go missing when they sort of needed him, but there were other games where he was dropping like 30 kills and none of the riflers were helping him. I think it was a weird roster who should have done better than they did, and I don't really have the answers as to why they didn't do as good as they did. I think some of the rounds that they lost were comms. I think some of their map pool was incredibly shallow. I think you've got Inters that, to be honest, was actually okay. Like he wasn't a big detriment to this team. But when you've got Heavy God not performing at the same level he did on OG that he did on Endpoint, he still put up really good stats, don't get me wrong, but I feel like you needed a bit more out of that Heavy God Axile combination. There were games where Boomich just didn't get any kills like at all, and then IC's just sort of stuck because as a more supportive AWPer, if you are trying to set up your team and then hitting the shots you want to hit, that's fine. But if you're setting up your team and then your riflers aren't actually doing anything, that makes it just really hard for the team to win.
So at the time, we were hyping IC up. We believed that he was going to do great things on Cloud9. I do feel like we have to put this one in the bucket as a bit of a non-starter, really. I don't want to say we failed because I do think we're going to see something very different on VP. But it was a rough year for him, and ultimately what we said didn't really come to fruition in 2024.
I think that's valid, but also I'm going to argue, and I'm going to say it's actually just stayed exactly the same. It's almost as if like that Cloud9 thing just didn't exist, but the reality is that it did, and I feel like you have to put a couple of blemishes on the record because of that. But ultimately, I'm still in the same position as I was last year with IC. I mean, like they just made the Spodek. That team's looking really fun. Yes, it's a honeymoon period. Yes, it's the first event. I know. We had to just give that same criticism to Ultimate, but I like that team. That team's really cool, and it serves exactly the same. The thing is, what's good about that is proof of concept, because you've got Flammus that's really aggressive, Flip that's really aggressive, Electronic that is willing to be aggressive, but also then you've got the supportive element of Icy, and it's proof of concept is that's the blueprint that he wants to go into teams with, and if he is going to do well, that's the blueprint of teams he's going to be with. So I think he's actually got better individuals around him now. I don't know what the Electronic IGLing looks like, but to be honest, in essence, I think in a weird way, you look at those players and they can take a lot of initiative themselves, and I don't actually think it needs to be as micromanagey as it was before. You are going to get a bit of Jamie-itis in there. Like there are still going to play a bit Jamie sometimes, because you can kill the man, but not the idea. But I don't know. I feel like they're actually going to do quite well. But I want to be very hesitant. I don't want to be like, they're going to be the best team ever, because I've been upset by VP many times in the last 2 years.
We all have. We all have.
But I really want them to do well. Like, I really want them to do well.
When you plunk Icy, though, in the Spodek, and you're putting him in those big stages, how does he perform? Because we speak a lot about Ultimate struggled at this level.
Yeah.
Icy was in a very similar position. I mean, I think that he had a lot more experience under his belt at the beginning of last year when Cloud9 picked him up, but he hasn't had a chance to really show that. So I would say that Ultimate actually is a little bit ahead of him in terms of time playing at this level.
Yeah.
So the question is, how does Icy cope when you throw him on that big stage?
I don't know. I think he'll be fine. Like, to be honest, I actually just think he'll be fine. Like you're playing with Flammus, who has just got recently a lot of exposure playing on that stage, and he was loving it in Shanghai. You've got the core of VP that have been around Yonks and have got all of that experience. Like they've won majors. Like they understand what it's like to play in front of a crowd. So I think he's actually in good company there, and he is required to have good games, but he's not required to take over a game. And if Icy is taking over a game, that is just a really big benefit for your team, and that means it's basically like a win more condition. So I think it'll be fine.
So we said at the beginning of 2024, well, at the beginning of season 1, which was the middle of 2024 to the beginning of 2025. I'm getting confused with my own timelines now. Ignore me. We said Icy was a good investment. I stand by that. I just think it's going to play out a little bit longer, but I don't think anyone's lost money if you were throwing cash behind him when we told you to. I don't necessarily
it's not moved.
There's no growth.
If we are saying Ultimate's come on a little bit more than him, I think that's a valid thing to say. In terms of whether that Cloud9 project failed, yes, it did. So do you actually maybe reduce it a little bit in his stock? I mean, I'm not. I mean, I'll put more money in. Like, why not?
There we go. He's going to throw some more cash.
I'll do it. I'm a big believer in IC, so I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'll put even more money in on him, and we'll see how he does in a year.
I'm putting a question mark next to whether or not we got it right, though.
I think it's very difficult to tell, but actually, in terms of the player, I think we were correct. In terms of the achievements, we were not correct at all when they failed massively.
There we go. Okay, so let's move on to another AWPer. So this conversation came up during the RMRs, if I'm not mistaken. I'm choosing players that have big question marks around them. Was it the RMRs or the ESL Pro? It was definitely it was actually ESL Pro League when this player first came up. But it's an interesting one, and I can summarize this in one line, which is what you said, which was great AWPer, wrong team. And that was specifically for Wrinkle in the then NIP, which was what a mess last year was for NIP. Like, what the hell was that?
It's still a mess. Like, let's be honest.
Can I tell you what, actually, like, let me just be honest now, like, truth bomb time. I'm probably in so much trouble. Someone in South Africa is going to be so upset with me. Fuck it, let's say it. Mistim got called up to IGL NIP, okay? Mad respect to Mistim. I've watched his hustle since he was very young. I don't want to take anything away from Mistim. I'm not criticizing Mistim. I rate him highly as a player. So if anyone is watching this and shares it with Mistim, I want to be clear. When it was announced, a lot of South African CS fans went mental. They were so hyped. They were so excited. Everyone was sharing it. Look at it. Mistim's made it. He's IGLing for NIP. Big deal. And I didn't weigh in because I just went, shit. Because to me, I was like, you are a stopgap. Like, you are filling the spot so that they can ride out the rest of the year. You are not, this is not the big break. You will not stay there. At the end of the year, you will be out. Like, you are literally just the stopgap. And everyone is hyping this up. And you are probably sitting there being hyped up. And damn, guys, like, this is not what you think it is. Like, he is just the stopgap. And I feel horrible saying that, but that was how I felt about the situation. And then guess what? That was kind of what happened. Despite the fact that I would say NIP actually punched above their weight at the RMRs, I was kind of pleasantly, I don't even want to say surprised. I was just pleasantly like, meh, that's fun. And then kind of, it was better than expected. But for the most part, that team really was a bit of a non-starter last year. It was kind of just thrown together in the hope that they could get through the year. That's what it felt like, if I'm honest.
Yeah, top by 2025, and then you do that. Look, I will weigh in on the Mistim situation, and I will also say that when Mistim took over in-game leadership duties, that team got a hell of a lot better, and he should be really proud with what he achieved in such a short space of time with a project that wasn't really ever his. So especially when you were incredibly young as well, and you have to sort of be thrown in as that failsafe almost. I think he did a really, really good job, and I know that he'll be probably a bit disheartened by it because they literally said Mistim is the future, and then they've parked him in the present. But I hope he is getting support from NIP so he can go somewhere and show off, because he's got a lot of potential, and I was really impressed whenever I watched NIP under his leadership. So that's that aside. What do I think about NIP? What now or that last year? Because last year, I mean less said about that, the better, probably.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's the wrinkle conversation, right? Is that there was so much. Let's get into wrinkle. I'll preface this. Obviously, there is another episode on this channel where we break down the new NIP roster on another show, Feed the Trolls. So if you want to go see that, Babsky weighs in on a lot of stuff. But here, right now, let's talk about Wrinkle. So I saw him blast 4 groups, I believe it was, where there was a lot of talk around him in this NIP roster. Lots of, and I will quote it, someone was calling him the next Manasi at some points online somewhere. Like, that was kind of the hype around him. He's the next big superstar AWPer coming in, the simple Manasi. And I was like, oh, it feels, I know there's been a lot of talk around him, but that feels very, very large to throw on him. I think that there was a lot of excitement. But he came in, and this was something Manasi said in an interview where he said Wrinkle is easy. Once you understand how he plays, he's easy to read. And I think it is possibly the downfall of these young AWPers coming into tier 1 is that the player on the other end, if they have more experience, they read you very quickly, as we've mentioned with sort of Ultimate and how that happened. So for me, Wrinkle got read very quickly, but then also didn't necessarily have the pieces around him to support, right? This was before Mistim, but there was that he lacked the support structure a young player I think sometimes needs. Which I say that, I mean, Liquid, he has the support structure and it's not working. So I'm not sure if this actually makes sense, but that was kind of where I was sitting with NIP and Wrinkle, sort of middle of last year.
I think what's interesting is the way that NIP, I think it's actually a circumstance rather than trajectory for Wrinkle, because I think you can mold yourself to be a little bit more unpredictable. But the way that NIP has sort of, I guess, been in the last year, it actually relies a lot on Wrinkle just popping off. So Wrinkle's going to go back to like these creature comforts that he is used to, and he can get away with that in tier 2. Like, it's really easy to get away with that in tier 2. But you're right, once it goes to tier 1, again, that's literally the same parallel that you draw with him and Ultimate. I think if you want a hot take, I think if some Pious wasn't available for Heroic, I think Wrinkle could have slotted in there pretty convincingly. And I think under Saw, that would have been a chance for him to reinvent himself a little bit. So I wonder how well that would have gone in my little parallel universe, but I think that's an interesting thing to think about. I think he is a good sniper. I think if you look at his stats, they always are by and large really consistent. The fun thing about NIP, which is not relevant to this at all, but I think it's quite funny, is that they were playing Aurora in these closed qualifiers for CCT. They played 2 maps. It was 1-1. They had to go to a third map, but both teams forfeit the game because they wanted to play Blast Open or Blast Rising, like that open quali. So they both forfeit at the same time. So to decide who won the game, they had a coin flip. And NIP won the coin flip, so they won the game. Like, what the hell?
What the hell? So I'm
Yeah.
presuming, just keep me up to date because I'm still so confused with the Valve ranking. Was there ranking points involved in this
There
CCT
is ranking
game?
points involved in this, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I understand the NIP struggle because they're trying to get into as many events as possible, but shit, just shit. Like that's
just
crazy.
funny.
So
it's just funny.
it is kind of funny. That was a fun one. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's talk about what we mentioned with Wrinkle. So during this Pro League thing, we didn't really, because we were doing a Pro League special, we just focused on the players. We don't really talk about sort of selling and investing. But I think at the time, like the commentary was very much like Wrinkle's actually like a really good talent to watch for the future. The question now that I suppose I pose to you, BDog, is in this new NIP lineup, which is very interesting. You take away Jax and you make sure that the Portuguese riflers are in the mix. Do you think Wrinkle shines?
I think it's an interesting point of discussion because I don't know. It's the honest answer is I don't know. I'm not gonna beat around the bush because it actually depends on a lot of variables in this team. Because I actually think what's quite clever is if you look at this team, I see a lot of the really, really old Ents lineup that found success in a lot of these players. Obviously, Snappy's the one that remains, but I think that Jerks can play a lot like Nerds. I think Arostos has similar tendencies to the way Diha used to play. And I think Wrinkle can, where he is aggressive, I think he can be some Pious level. So that's why I sort of also made that heroic little sort of bit in there, because I actually do think it's true, but also I think that they play quite similar. So I reckon if you've got the same mold, then maybe it can be achieved a lot more. What I will say, though, is that I don't know how Exist has not spotted this issue and has worked on it, because Exist has got a deep coaching history, obviously a deep playing history as well, but like he was working in Heroic and they were having a lot of success. He's now come to NIP, not having success. And it's like, I feel like everyone knows this issue with Wrinkles. It's like, why are we not sorting it out? But maybe because you've now got this blueprint of a mold of, I think NIP will play a lot like old Ents did when Ents were having a lot of success. Maybe Exist can have time to sort that out with Wrinkle. Maybe Snappy's got some ideas about how Wrinkle wants to develop. But the truthful answer is I don't know. But I think if you look at it that way, and that's the way I'm sort of looking at this new NIP, then maybe I think he won't be one to put up 30 bombs every single game. I don't think that's the sort of play that this NIP team needs of him, but I think like he certainly can. It's all about the unpredictability. It's all about playing correctly in the system that makes sure you're not being punished. And I think Snappy will have a good read on how to adjust that. It's just whether they can do that, which is a very long-winded way of saying I don't know, but I hope so.
There you go. You don't know, but you hope so. Apparently, according to Babsky and Thorin, we have to give them till IEM Cologne before we can make a full judgment on this NIP roster. So you and I can.
We won't see them at any of those events, but cool.
Nah.
Yeah.
Let's do the corporate speaker. We'll circle back for IEM Cologne, and hopefully they qualify. Sure. Final one that I've pulled. And again, so this came from the ESL Pro League episode that we did. I think it was a season 20 special where we just spoke about players to keep an eye on.
Okay.
And I bring it up now because it's fun, but the final player that I'd love to talk about, and again, we don't have whether BDog was right or wrong about this one, and also because I don't think either of us really had an opinion here. I think we kind of just mentioned him as an interesting one. Was Jaber from Wildcard?
Oh no, I think he's been brilliant.
Right, that was why I kind of wanted to talk about it. I was like, we mentioned it. Let me give you the date real quick to tell you. Yeah, the 10th of September, we brought him up and we said, we don't really know about Wildcard. We don't really at the moment. Like there's question marks, and I think that was kind of the end of Wildcard season. But you brought up Jaber and you were like, I kind of like this player. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. And I think it's played out bloody well for them, to be honest.
Yeah. I'd say so. I think they did really good at the major run for them. They have carried on, which I think is really hard for a team to do, especially after sort of I'd say unexpectedly making a good competitive run at the major. Like you see a lot of teams where they'll be happy with that, and then they just go, okay, well that's it, and they just sort of fall off a cliff. I think they're playing well. Obviously, they lost to Astralis 2-0 in Blast Bounty. Don't really want to talk about that one. I'd rather talk about Katowice, where 2-0 over Big. They then go 3 maps with Furia. They then have close maps against Liquids, apart from the 13-0. But I don't know. I think that team's cool. I think Jaber's playing really well. I don't know. Again, it's one of those where it's actually just annoying for the viewer because it's just like, I don't know what they're going to achieve. Are they going to be consistent or are they going to be just still mid? But I hope they kick on in the right direction. But a big proponent of that success is not only Sus, but it's also Jaber. Like Jaber's been so good, like on LAN, which I think is a really important thing for this team. If they keep getting consistent LAN invites, I don't know that they will, but then they'll have a guarantee of playing well because Jaber's playing well.
Their RMR run and their major run for me was really impressive because they did not have an easy one. They played like big, hard opposition. I mean, through the RMRs, it was just convincing, which surprised everyone. Into the major, like they played some tough opposition and they did such a good job. And considering how they were kind of written off and the conversation around Jaber, which was like, but inexperienced, we don't know, is this the right time? Is he going to rise to the occasion? Like you said, they threw him in China for like a couple of weeks and left him there on LAN with some of the biggest names, and he held his own. And there hasn't been, I would say there's a bit of a drop off from what we saw at the major last year, but I can kind of give them a little bit of grace because I think most of the teams take that break and come back. It's hard to maintain the same trajectory. But I don't think that they've looked unimpressive. I think that they've held their own, considering, which is a positive if you're a North American CS fan, because there's not a lot of positives going for you right now. So this is like the one thing that you can, I suppose, hold on to.
I think that's the thing. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where it's like we kind of just expected them to kind of get invited to these events and think, oh, well, they had one good tournament at the major that they're going to get owned now. And I don't know, some maps they got owned, sure, but other maps they played pretty damn well. And like, it was a competitive game against Furia. They destroyed Big, and Jaber got like 2 aces in that best of 3 in both maps. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you're playing really well. So they looked competitive, which I think is the happiness for a North American fan, but also just the happiness for you want it to be competitive, and it was.
So let's have a little bit of fun now, because we didn't do this during the Pro League Season 20 special, so we get to do it now. I'll tell you what, BDog. Sell me this pro. Sell me Jaber. Like, I kind of feel like that's a conversation we need to have now. Is he worth keeping an eye on for the 2025 season?
Yeah, look, I think he's definitely worth keeping an eye on. The only issue I actually have with Jaber is how much this wildcard team can realistically achieve. And now roster changes have been made to complexity. Where does he go? Like that's the worry for me. Is it if he sort of outgrows wildcard, which to be honest, I think he's still on a very good development path for that roster. But if he starts playing above his weight and he continues to do it on a consistent basis, which we know he's capable of because he's a very mechanically gifted player, then where could he move to? He can't really go anywhere. So I would actually not invest in Jaber right now because you don't know what that wildcard team is going to achieve, whether it is going to be a consistent appearance at tournaments, whether it's going to be a consistent expectation of them looking competitive but not winning all the games as well. That team does need more time on LAN. That team needs a little bit more development, and it's one of those where you're excited to watch it in terms of this is really cool that they're still here, but it's not one where I look at and I think this team's going to upset, this team's going to surprise people. And from that point of view, if Jaber isn't delivering that level on a very, very consistent basis, and he's not going to get a move anywhere. And if he's not going to get a move anywhere, it then goes back to the point of Complexity just made their roster changes. They're taking a chance on you. Why didn't they take a chance on Jaber? I wonder if they reached out when they spoke about Jaber. They probably spoke about Lake from M80. Like, there'll be a lot of decisions there. But for now, I wouldn't invest because you don't know the trajectory of that team. You don't really know what the landscape as well is going to look like for VRS and Counter-Strike, and that means how often will we see teams we don't know. So for now, I'd just keep an eye on him, but I wouldn't put money in.
There we go. Just watch that one, and it will be interesting to watch it unfold as we move our way to the major. And there we go. Those were the 5 I chose, BDog, just because they're 5 that are currently in the conversation, right? And they're 5 that we've had a chance to see at IEM Cato. And also, I kind of thought it was cool that 5 of the players we spoke about were players that we're now seeing on the big stage that we did get to see in the major. That for me is a big thing, is like we featured a lot of these players and we got to see them do the runs, which is kind of what the show is about, is to get you familiar with those names as they move into tier 1. So I think we did a good job in 2024 of showcasing some of the talent that's available. I conveniently left out the ones that didn't do well. Don't know if you noticed that, but it's our show and we can do what we want.
No, we can talk about a few of them. I think. Look, Gizmi got promoted to the main Monte team, so I think that's actually still a success story because when we spoke about him, we were like, okay, he's now in-game lead in Monte Gen, or he's now in-game lead in the main Monte team, so that's a good step up. We spoke about Sinners, and I'm going to speedrun this. We spoke about Sinners, we spoke about Mikey and Morisco. Mikey attracted interest from a different team, so he moved over. Morisco has been playing really well. Sinners are, I think they recently lost, but they were on like an 8 best-of-3 win streak, and they've got this new AWPer now called Peppo, who is like actually unbelievable. Like he only played in ESEA main for the academy team before making the jump. Like, so he's done a similar ultimate jump, right? Where it's like ultimate was like tier 2, tier 3, now gone tier 1. This guy's gone ESEA main, skipped a few divisions, now gone tier 2, like top of tier 2, and he's just owning. Like, that's another conversation. But I think Morisco's done pretty good. We spoke a bit about Fear and Jambo and Passion UA. Well, Fear's now gone to Fnatic. Jambo, I think, unfortunately, has been left behind a little bit, and I don't really have much hope in that Passion UA project now because, again, you've lost Fear. You've lost a really big proponent of that. We spoke about some other people that I can't remember. AW's gone to Amcal, and that team looks really good, and he's actually playing really well. So I don't know. I think we're doing okay. The only one that I don't want to talk about really is Fluxo. That one and we stinks. Won't. Unlucky.
That stings. Here we go. We'll just ignore that like it never happened because that's what we get to do. Obviously, we'll be back soon with another episode, and we'll be back to showcasing some tier 2 talent. I think this one's especially exciting with the Valve ranking system because you might actually get to see them sooner than a couple of months, and maybe they make their way in. BDog, I know you got to go and commentate now on some tier 2. So go to work. I'm not going to go to work.